Alright y'all, today we're making a Radiant Orb build. This is a very popular build that a lot of people do. There's a lot of different ways you can play with this. I'm going to be showing you my favorite way to be playing this Radiant Orb build. But before we get into it, if you guys like Baldur's Gate 3 content, mostly around fun RP type builds, then consider hitting that like and subscribe button. We're a small channel, but we are growing pretty quick. I didn't think this channel get very much traction going, and it was just like a fun side hobby to be doing. But no, we're getting engagement. That's crazy. So thank you guys for watching, and for those of you who have already hit that subscribe button. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get into the build. We're going to go over a little bit of disclaimers and how this is all going to go down. So let's move over to the character creation screen. All right, first off, before we get into the build, normally I do builds that do not rely upon gear or items. This is an exception to that. There are going to be items and equipment that are required to make this build work. Now, how it works is it's just based off of radiant damage. So how you get your radiant damage is up to you. That's for you to decide. There's a lot of different ways to do it. My way is not the best way. This is just the way that I like to play the most. And of course, this is viable in tactician mode and honor mode. So I just kind of want to give you the basics so you can either do the same thing or change it up to a different style that you prefer. So again, this is just my way that I build it. And starting off with character creation, I usually do this build with Shadowheart, but with character creation with Shadowheart, you can't change your class other than a cleric. And for me, I like to start off as a paladin with this build. So the paladin I go for is Oath of Vengeance. That's mainly for Inquisitor's Might and Vow of Enmity. We'll get there when we get to the leveling. But just know that I like to start off with Paladin for this. Background wise, you're not going to be able to change it if you pick Shadowheart. Now this is the way you want your ability points to be kind of spread out, because this is a Paladin, and then I'm going to be multi-classing into Cleric, so I want that kind of martial spellcaster. Strength is going to be really helpful for the weapons we're using to make sure we're hitting. And then Wisdom is going to be the spell type damage that we're going to be casting. We're dumping Charisma because the only thing that Charisma is going to affect is our Paladin auras, and we're not going to be using those. Intelligence we don't need. Constitution is kind of important, so that's why we're putting that at 14. And then Dexterity wise, yeah, we can just put that at 12. We're going to be handling that initiative roll with our feats. So with the character creation out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the leveling. So now we got Shadowheart here, and we can go through the leveling process. At the end, we will have a gameplay segment in Act 3 with everything firing on all cylinders. But we're going to break it down by Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 first. And then in Act 1, I'm going to go through basically the gameplay loop that you're looking for. And then I'll break down the items that you can get in Act 1. And then I'll do the same thing in Act 2, and we really don't pick up anything in Act 3, so that section will be a little bit shorter. There's a mace, or I guess a Morning Star we can pick up in Act 3, but the build is very much complete at Act 2, but it gets going and it's very viable and effective in Act 1 as well. So starting off with leveling, the main reason why we're picking Paladin is because of Divine Smite. I like this to be a martial character that does spellcasting as well, and the spells for Paladin, unfortunately, there's not a lot of range radiant options, but they do have a great single target melee option in Divine Smite. So that's why we're taking this. Fighting style, you want to go with defense. This character is actually going to be very tanky, but also be able to debuff a lot of other enemies to basically make everybody really hard to hit in your party. So it's a really good tank, actually. It's a really good defensive character in general. Prepared spells, none of these are that important. Maybe if you don't have your oath up, your oath ability up, you can use Divine Favor. This is probably what I would take first, and then we can move to level 3. Level 3, we get Vow of Enmity. This is a really good ability. This gives you advantage on your attack rolls. It's going to help you, make those melee attacks, especially early on. It's going to be a little bit harder to hit targets, but consider having Bless on this character as well through another party member. But Vow of Enmity, really good, really good. So spell-wise, maybe consider taking one of the smites because of those condition damage, and this build does have synergy with condition damage, but the main condition we're going to be working with is Radiant Orbs. So just keep that in mind. This early game, not that important. So we can move on to level 4. At level 4, we got some more spells. Again, this spell, it's not that important. This prepared spell that we're doing, not that important. So for our first feat, I think Alert is the one that I would go with the most because of that that bonus to your initiative. Our dexterity is not very high. It's not going to be helping us out very much. We are going to be taking ability score improvement later on, but this early in the game right now, it's not so important, and you'll see why when we get to level 8, and we can kind of talk about why we're taking ability score improvement then instead of now. So for this level, for this feat right here, I would just take Alert. In level 5, this is where we're going to stop with Paladin, but we can now talk about some of the items that you should be picking up around this level. But if we're going to be talking about the items that you're going to be picking up, we should first start with the conditions that we're going to be working with. The first condition we're going to be looking at is Radiant Orbs. So Radiant Orbs will give a -1 to attack rolls, and they also shed light on our surrounding area. When an enemy attacks, that stack will fall off, but eventually you're going to be applying more Radiant Orbs than they can, debuff themselves with, or they're going to be dead by the time, they could get rid of all their stacks. And then the second condition we're going to be working with here is Reverberation. Reverberation basically gives them a -1 to their saving throws. So that's their strength, dexterity, and constitution saving throws. And if they get 5 stacks of these, they take a 1d4 thunder damage, and then they have to perform a dexterity or a constitution saving throw, or they go prone. And if they're prone, you get advantage on attacking them. So those are the two conditions we're going to be working with. And the first item we're going to come across is probably the Luminous Armor. You get this in the Saloonite outpost in the Underdark. This is probably one of the first places that you're going to visit when you do hit the Underdark, unless you go a roundabout way. But this is the first piece of armor you want. Whenever you do radiant damage, it does a radiant shockwave, which then disperses radiant orbs out in a small area. So this is the very first key item to this kit. And then sticking with the Underdark, if you complete the quest down there with a certain NPC, you'll be getting the ability to use them as a vendor, and you can buy the Boots of Stormy Clamor. So what this will do is when the flayer or the character inflicts condition damage, which in this case it's radiant orbs, they also inflict reverberation. So that reverberation is again going to hurt their saving throws, and then when they get 5 stacks of them, they take damage, and then they have to pass a check or they go prone. So those are probably the first 2 items you're going to come across. And then a little bit later on in the mountain pass, on top of the temple, there is the Holy Lance Helm. This basically, when a creature misses their attack on you, they take 1 to 4 radiant damage. So that radiant damage then will apply more radiant orbs, and those radiant orbs will then debuff an enemy to make them miss more. So kind of we're getting that feedback loop going on. And then under that temple is the Kresh, and this is where you're going to get Gloves of Belligerent Skies. This is when you do a condition damage, or you do thunder, lightning, or radiant damage, you then also inflict 2 turns of reverberation. With these 4 items, you've already got the build going, and this is around level 4 or 5. You'll probably be basically done with Act 1 at this point. But let's move on back over to our character screen here at level 5 for Paladin. This is going to be our last level as a Paladin, and really it's just for extra attack. That's a really important ability for us, or it's a really important feature for us. Again, just so we can do 2 melee strikes, 2 smites. Again, because I like to have this character as a martial character as well as a frontliner, able to do single target damage, and there's no better option for that than smite, and then obviously extra attacks is going to help that. We also do pick up Misty Step. This is just a great mobility option for us. And then spell wise, none of these are important. We're not worried about Paladin spells. We're really just here for Divine Smite. So this is really just pick whatever you want. I will go probably with Magic Weapon, I guess. But again, last level we're taking a Paladin. So we can kind of move to Act 2, and then we're going to be multi-classing into Cleric. So Act 2, level 6, we're picking Cleric as our next class. Cantrip wise, always the best is Guidance. Everything else is kind of up to you. Produce Flame, this is actually a really nice one that you cast in your hand, you can throw, and it goes off your Wisdom modifier. I didn't mention that in my Cleric, basically White Mage build for the ultimate support, but this is what I would take for if you want to do damage. Everything else is kind of up to you. Light is also kind of nice. Domain wise, we're actually going to go with Light Domain. This is such a great subclass for Cleric. So the biggest feature here is Warding Flare. This will give disadvantage on attacks, and at first you can only cast it on yourself, but we'll level along so you can cast it on allies as well. So already you can start to see how this class is so tanky and just debuffs everybody, because you have Warding Flare to help with everybody, and then you're also just spreading so many radiant orbs, which makes getting hit that much harder because of those minus attack rolls that radiant orbs do. And for our prepared spells, we can just get rid of all these. Guiding Bolt, this is going to be our range radiant dealer, so this is just a really nice one to take for range. I would take Sanctuary. This is just an amazing spell to protect, allies, or if you need to get out of a situation, especially in honor mode. There's some times where you do just need to run away, and Sanctuary will give you that ability. And for our next spell, we could take Bless. This is okay for right now. This is not a bad option. And if you don't want to take Bless, you can take something like Shield of Faith for your concentration. This is obviously going to give you 2 more armor. The more armor you have, the more likely enemies are to miss you. If they miss you, then that feedback or loop of, radiant damage starts to tick off, and then you get the orbs and the reverberation. So this would kind of more help with that situation, or that feedback loop that we're looking for. And then Healing Word, this is just really just a nice spell, so you don't have to, if you have an ally go down, you don't have to be right next to him to pick him up. You can just use Healing Word from 18 meters away and pick them up. So a little bit of utility with this. Again, it's not really the main focus we're looking for, but it's nice to have. So level 7, this is a big level here. This is where we get our Divinity charge, and we have one of them right now, but this is the big daddy here. Radiance of Dawn. This does an AoE around you, and it does a 2d10 plus 5 for the radiance damage. You get the plus 5, I believe, because of your level. I think that's how it works. But this is an amazing ability. This is how you're going to spread a lot of radiant damage to, an area of effect around you. And essentially you can just debuff an entire room with this spell. If it misses, they still do take half damage. So automatically you're going to be doing radiant damage. So you're going to be spreading those radiant orbs. So this is an amazing spell for it. This is why we take so much wisdom, or we're going to buff it up later, is to make sure that these cleric spells with their radiant damage are hitting. And then spell wise for this level, nothing really important. Again, that Radiance of Dawn, this is the one that we really wanted, and we're going to continue on with cleric. And now we're at level 8. So for this third level, nothing really that important. Again, we've already basically, we're really looking for one more spell, but at this point our build is very much online, and we can kind of take a break. Let's get to level 9 first, and then we can take a break and talk about the next pieces of items that we're going to be picking up. So over here, again, nothing important. We can just move on. Maybe take Warding Bond, because again, this is a very good tank character. Okay, and level 9, we can stop here because we're probably around the end of Act 2. So we can talk about some of the items that you could be picking up here. So in Act 2, you can pick the Corsication Ring. I think I'm pronouncing it right. Probably not. You're going to get this in the Last Light Inn. You're going to get this in the Cellar. So what this ring does is when you do spell damage, and Smite is not spell damage, by the way, but when you do something like Radiance of Dawn and you're in a illuminated area, you will inflict radiant orbs. So this is just stacking more radiant orbs. Another item you're getting here is the Luminous Gloves. This is every time you do radiant damage, you're going to give, again, the target more radiant orbs. So we're getting into the point where these gloves are optional because you have so many sources that you're giving. You're distributing so many radiant orbs. So this one is optional because at some point it might be a little bit like overkill of how many radiant orbs you're distributing. So you might not want to replace your reverberating gloves with this, again, because reverberation, you're only getting those from 2 sources, and we're getting radiant orbs from so many other things right now. So this is just an option. It's up to you. And I do think that's it for items. Now there is a ring in the Char's Gauntlet that will do an additional 2 damage to things that are illuminated, and because again, radiant orbs, they're a light source, so you'll just get 2 extra damage every time. But there are other rings that do just like a flat damage that you don't need anything with, like with poison damage. So that one's a little bit optional, but now the kit is complete as far as the items and gear. How you do your radiant damage, again, is up to you. So now we can go back to leveling, and you can kind of see what I'm doing to, get a lot of radiant damage out there. So level 9, again, this is probably the end of Act 2 right here. We get another cantrip, nothing really important here. Feat wise, this is when we want to take ability score improvement, and we want to bump our wisdom up to 18. Again, just to ensure that our radiant damage spells are hitting as often as possible. So we can move on to level 10. This is basically going to be Act 3. And Act 3, this is when I consider the build complete because we get Spirit Guardians. So Spirit Guardians is really nice. You call forth their spirits. They either do radiant or necrotic damage. You choose that. Of course, with this build, we're going with radiant damage. So this is going to be your concentration spell. And the really nice thing about this is you cast those the Spirit Guardians on you. You can precast it. So if you know if you're going to get into a fight, I would precast this. And then when you're in the fight, you'll have the Spirit Guardians hit just passively. And then you can just smite or do Radiance of Dawn, and you're just getting so many attacks in without really having to do too much. And the Spirit Guardians, again, they're just ticking damage away by anybody around you. So this is a really nice ability. This is, again, when the build becomes complete. And then we can move on to level 11. And level 11, this is where we get improved warding flare. This is when we can use that warding flare reaction on our allies. We also get another Divinity charge. This is super important. I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but Divinity charges come back on short rest. And now instead of having 3 between long rest, now we get 6. And so if you go into a fight and there are a lot of enemies, you can absolutely nuke the room with Radiance of Dawn and just spread so many Radiant Orbs, especially if you cast haste on this character. Again, that's 2, Radiance of Dawn moves back to back, and the entire room's not going to be able to do anything just because you're casting so many Radiant Orbs. And then when those enemies are trying to attack, the reverberation loop is just going to go on, and everybody's just going to fall apart. This is actually a very strong overall solo build. I'm not playing it as a solo build, but just know if you want to make a solo build, this is a very good one. Spell-wise, nothing really that important for us. Maybe take Remove Curse. This is a really nice utility. There's 2 places that you would use it in Act 3. But we can move on to level 12, which we're just going to take another level into Cleric, mostly just for Death Ward. This is just a nice ability, especially when you go to, see Raphael, having Death Ward in the Springs, just to be able to cast it on everybody. This is just a great buff for everybody, especially if you have a source where you get that long rest ability. So Death Ward, this is just a really nice spell in general. And yeah, that's our leveling, that's our Cleric done, and now we can move over to a gameplay section. All right, onto our gameplay section here. You see we have all the items we were talking about. This cloak here you get at Moonrise. I think you get it at a vendor. It's not necessary for the build, but it does help with reverberation. They kind of have some synergy there. There's also a necklace. I think it's called, let me look up, the Spine Shutter Amulet. You get that in Isabel's room in Act 2 at Moonrise Tower. That's also a very nice item that pairs well with this kit. I don't think it's absolutely necessary, but just know it also has synergy with all this. And if you want to pick that up, I would. For some reason, I lost it in this playthrough. I don't know where it is. I lose shit in this game. I sell it off. I'm like, I don't remember where I sold that, or I don't know what happens. I don't know what happens to my gear. Moving on. I didn't talk about weapons because weapon-wise, I like to take swords. Again, I prefer the RP approach and what I want my characters to take. I just like swords a lot. So that's also another reason why I take Paladin, because again, Divine Smite gives you access to melee radiant damage. Now there are hammers and maces and I guess Morning Stars that all have radiant damage as early as Act 1. Obviously you have Lathander's, the Blood of Lathander here. You get this in Act 1. At the end of the Creche. And also there's a hammer in the Grim Forge that a dwarf vendor sells you that does radiant damage with it. That's also a great option. And then, but for here, I'm going to be using the Sacred Star. You get this in Act 3. Once you get to Baldur's Gate, there's a vendor, like a temple shop. You get that from him. But I didn't list those because, again, the weapons are kind of up to you. They're out there. I don't want to tell you which weapons you get. And I picked Paladin so I could have Divine Smite, so I always have access to radiant damage in melee. Got all my gear here. We're going to start a little bit of trouble in this area over here. It's going to save the game, obviously. And we're going to go in juiced. So we're going to have our characters here. Gale here is our haste battery, essentially. And we know we're going to get into a fight, so we're going to go ahead and pre-cast Spirit Guardians, and we're going to uptick it to 5. We can turn turn-based mode on. And our other character here, I was actually building them as a different variant of this. So they actually have 2 fighter, and they got the 2 fighter so they could have action surge. So there's a lot of different ways you can play with getting radiant damage. You could drop Paladin altogether and go 5 fighter, 7 cleric. You could just go cleric the whole way. But again, I like to have that martial ability. I'm a sucker for Paladins, for Divine Smite. So that's why I made my choices. But let's get into combat here and let's absolutely wipe the floor of all the enemies that we come across. So we're getting to the combat here. Since we have alert, we start with initiative. So we already have Spirit Guardians. Spirit Guardians is going to let us just walk right on through them all. Look at all those radiant orbs. Oh, the feedback loop from reverberation. This is amazing. Okay, so we haven't even taken our action yet. So that's how strong this precast Spirit Guardians can be. So we can go ahead and use Radiance of Dawn. That's a nice area of effect we got going on there. Oh, just using one move. Everybody is really, they have so many stacks of radiating orbs. These 4 here have 10 on them. And this person has 2 over here, but So they have -10 to their attack rolls. They're not going to be able to hit us, essentially. And so we have another attack here. We're just going to go ahead and Divine Smite. We're going to take care of this person here. They're gone. And because we have extra attack, we get to go again. And we just do a little bit of damage to them. It's a nice bit of like single target damage. It's really meaty. Obviously, you're going to get more damage out of a two-handed weapon with Great Weapon Master. But this is more on the, I want to use a shield. I want to be that tankier side, and I can still do a lot of single target damage. It's just, yes, there is more ways you can do single target damage than using a mace, but this is a nice option, a nice all-arounder essentially. So with this turn, you would think we're over, but we actually have Misty Step, so we can just teleport across the room, and then apply more radiant orbs. So there's look, this person already has 4 stacks of reverberation, 1 more reverberation. And they're going to have to, succeed that check. They're going to take damage. So you can just see how effective we are in just 1 turn. And then this stays active when it's not your turn, when they're trying to hit you. So let's see how that plays out. These 2 dingleberries over here, they just get out of the way. Just don't even worry about them. I just don't need Gale getting hit and having the haste fall off. That would make me look really silly. So we can just skip their turn. Now let's see what the enemy does. Just more counterspell. God, counterspell is such a great reaction, guys. It really locks down a room or an encounter. So you can see that person, they're trying to attack us. They built up the reverberation because they were missing. Again, just the synergy between radiant orbs and reverberation is just crazy good. And let's say that this person wasn't a cleric and they couldn't, cast this on themselves. You have this is where your Radiant Knight, your Shadowheart, can do improved Warding Flare. So that's just going to help keep them alive. They succeeded anyways, not a big deal. And we'll just do another run through with our Radiant Orbs, or our Spirit Guardians, I should say, just to make sure we give everybody a little love, and we can move back more towards the center of the room. They're going to try to hit again. Oh no, poor little gnomes. And we can just do Radiance of Dawn, taking out everybody. And we might be able to just end the encounter here. They're dead. Ooh, not enough movement speed. That's not true. I can just go ahead and Misty Step right into them. Hit them with Spirit Guardians some more. Got disadvantage on it because of their aura, but hit them anyways. Got like no health left. And then yeah, this is a Radiant Orb build or showcase, but let's just end it with Fireball. Cool. That was fun. But yeah, you see how effective the build is there. I mentioned a different few items that you could pick up to even, boost this build even further. But yeah, that's the build. That's the showcase there. Let me know how you guys would build this variant. My last Dragoon video, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but I had somebody mention how you could take Monk and get some free jumps with the Dragoon build. Those are the comments I love to see. So if you made it this far, thank you very much. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video for the next build. Peace.